him as he wishes to consume now.
Mr. President.
Senator from Arizona.
I'd like to use 8 minutes of my 10 minutes. Mr. President, my favorite author is Ernest Hemingway, as he is of many millions of people throughout the world. One of his most famous short stories is entitled The Snows of Kilimanjaro. At the beginning of this short story, he says, Kilimanjaro is a snow-covered mountain, 19,710 feet high, and is said to be the highest mountain in Africa. Its western summit is called by the Maasai Nagaji Nai, the House of God. Close to the western summit, there's the dried and frozen carcass of a leopard. No one has explained what the leopard was seeking at that altitude. As the photograph shows here, Mr. President, the snows of Kilimanjaro may soon exist only in literature. Mr. President, there's been a lot of debate here about scientific evidence. 17,000 scientists say this, 10,000 scientists say that. My scientist says this, although clearly the National Academy of Sciences and other organizations, including the World Meteorological Organization and others, should have, I think, some weight with my colleagues. But the fact is, Mr. President, if I might quote the punchline from an old joke, you can believe me or your lying eyes. These are facts. These are facts that cannot be refuted by any scientist or any union or any special interest that's weighing in more heavily on this issue than any issue since we got into campaign finance reform. Mr. President, that's the Arctic Sea. That's the Arctic Sea, and you look at the red line, the boundary of it in 1979. Look at it now. You can believe me or your lying eyes. Look at Kilimanjaro. That picture was taken in 1993. That picture was taken in February of the year 2000. Take that down and put the other. All of us cherish our national parks, Mr. President. Have a look at the Glacier National Park. We'll have to have its name changed. The picture above was taken in 1932. That's a glacier ice cave. This picture is from the Glacier National Park archives. That's an ice cave in 1932. Look at it 50 years later, Mr. President. It's not there. There will be no more glaciers in Glacier National Park, so we may have to give it a different name. Mr. President, devastating fires across California. It's very interesting that we have this debate while devastating fires of unprecedented nature are sweeping across California, fueled by unusual drought conditions. I don't have to tell people what the consequences of that are. An ice-dammed lake drained recently when the Ward Hunt ice shelf, which a century ago rimmed the entire northern coast of Ellesmere Island, broke up along the coast of northeast Canada. NASA has confirmed that part of the Arctic Ocean that remains frozen year-round has been shrinking at a rate of 10% per decade since 1980. At a conference in Iceland in August, scientists told senior government officials the Arctic is heating up fast, disclosing disturbing figures from a massive study of polar climate change. Dr. Robert Carrell, who heads the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment Team, said, quote, "If you want to see what will be happening in the rest of the world 25 years from now, look at what's happening in the Arctic. Destruction of 70% of heat-sensitive coral reefs in the world. 70% of the heat-sensitive coral reefs in the world. Due to increases in water temperatures, places reef fisheries in jeopardy." I don't know what happens when the beginning of the food chain disappears, Mr. President. Increasing coastal damages from hurricanes. Researchers at the University of Texas, Wesleyan University, and Stanford University earlier this year reported in the national journal Nature that global warming is forcing species around the world, from California starfish to alpine herbs, to move into new ranges or alter habits that could disrupt ecosystems. An article in the July 3rd Journal of Hydrology, winters in New England are getting shorter. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, scientists, northern New England winters have receded by 1 to 2 weeks in length over the last 30 years. Dr. Paul Eckstein, Center for Health and Global Environment at Harvard Medical School, quote, "Concerns about climate change are often mistakenly placed into the distant future, but as the rate of climate change increases, so do the biological responses and costs associated with warming and unstable weather. The influence of intensifying droughts on the spread of West Nile virus in the U.S. and the impacts of rising carbon dioxide levels on allergies and asthma demonstrate that global warming has come into our backyards." Finally, as chair of the Climate Research Committee of the National Academy of Sciences says, "The planet has a fever and it's time to take action." Mr. President, I ask my colleagues not to listen so much to the opinions of labor unions, business, special interests, or even scientists. Look at what is happening around the world. Look at what is happening around the world. Use your eyes to see what's happening. The devastation wrought by climate change so far has been remarkable. Remarkable. Mr. President, there is a long series of things that are happening around the world. Key reports have been issued by the last few years by a number of bodies composed of the world's most eminent climate scientists, including the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the National Academy of Sciences, the U.S. Global Change Research Program, and these experts all reached the same conclusions. 1, greenhouse gases are increasing in the atmosphere because of human activities, and they're trapping increasingly more heat. Increasing amount of greenhouse gases. 2, increasing amounts of greenhouse gases are projected to cause irreparable harm as they lead to increased global temperatures and higher sea levels. And 3, the gases we emit to the atmosphere today will remain for decades or longer. Every ton we emit now will require greater reductions later, making it more difficult to protect the environment. Mr. President, it's interesting to me that in July of the year 2003, Governor Pataki of New York announced that 9 states have formally agreed to join New York in developing a regional strategy in the Northeast to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. 10 states. The states agreeing to participate include Connecticut, New Jersey, Vermont, New Hampshire, Delaware, Maine, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Cap and Trade Initiative, recommended by Governor Pataki, would include developing a market-based emissions trading system that would apply to power generations emitting carbon dioxide and is modeled after the highly successful acid rain program of the 1990 Clean Air Act. This amendment is modeled on the highly successful acid rain program of the 1990 Clean Air Act. It's modest in its proportions. The
senators consumed 8 minutes.
I'll reserve the balance of my